to take a look out in front, because we have from the Collings Foundation in Stowe, Massachusetts, an aircraft that we'll see a couple of times today. That is the F4U Corsair, being piloted by Dan McCue, who's a warbird pilot, former Delta Airlines captain. Now, ladies and gentlemen, put your fingers in your ears as the MS-760 comes back. Just put your finger in your ears and clap your elbows like this, because it's going to be really loud. To the main Japanese position. The Japanese called this airplane the Whistling Death. Today, flown by Dan McCue, the Collings Foundation F4U Corsair. Over your head, here comes the Corsair. $12,571 of these aircraft were built between 1942 and 1953. This aircraft was the star of a show back in the late 1960s starring Robert Conrad of the Black Sheep Squadron and Baba Black Sheep. That was the name of the series that featured this airplane, flown by the Marines. I believe a BMA 214, the Black Sheep Squadron, and they were under the command of Pappy Boyington. Major Pappy Boyington was called Pappy because he was in his late 20s, and most of his pilots were in their early 20s, and this is how that show started each and every time. We are born little lambs who have lost our way. Fighters ever built. At first, it was thought too powerful to fly from carrier decks. It was designated to Marine-based land units, land-based Marine units in the Pacific War. Because early in the days of carrier aviation, when the Corsair was assigned to aircraft carriers, they were having a great deal of difficulty landing this airplane on the deck of a carrier. The Horseman coming back in, you can see one of their fleet aircraft flown by Jim Beasley is that bent wing bird. Look at how the wing bends down at a 90-degree angle out from the fuselage down to the landing gear to make room for that incredibly large diameter Hamilton Standard propeller. A 13-foot diameter propeller, as Dan McCue from the Collings Foundation flies overhead in this amazing Corsair with a top speed of over 415 miles per hour at 20,000 feet. The early Corsairs were very difficult to land on the decks of the aircraft carrier. The pilot could not see over the nose to land properly. And so the British, the Royal Navy, who led the world in carrier aviation, borrowed some F4U Corsairs. As Dan McCue dives in from the left, hearing those great sounds of these radial engines, the British took a few Corsairs and did some modifications to them. First of all, as Dan McCue goes into a 4-point hesitation roll, the British raised the pilot's seat up a few inches and changed the canopy to a more bubble canopy. That's called a Malcolm hood. And then they changed the approach to the carrier deck, taking advantage of that downward bend in the wing, or that inverted gull wing shape, to fly an oval approach so that the pilot could look at through the crook at that wing and see the landing area until just before lining up. He could see paddles and then land safely on the deck of the carrier. But the Corsair was the last of the piston engine fighters. As I recall, the last Corsair came off the production line. Last pass, cameras on, Dan McCue, coming off the production line for the French Air Force in 1953. Corsairs still fly at the Reno National Air Races, finishing up this very weekend in Reno, Nevada. And he's out and going to set up for the tailhook legacy flight a little bit later. 35 years flying for Delta Airlines. Ladies and gentlemen, now flying the F4U Corsair. Let's give Dan McCue a big hand. He will be